Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh, and today we are taking a look at some very disturbing scenes coming out of Wisconsin, where there are voters still going ahead in the midst of a global pandemic for really a myriad of reasons, but it's really both parties, to be completely honest with you, that have the fault here for the possible slaughtering of their own voters due to this coronavirus crisis, putting people's lives at risk in a really direct and startling manner, with lines that are stretching for hours. So many poll workers quit now in a population of in the population of Milwaukee, there's like 5 polling places open for the entire population of Milwaukee. Like, it's ridiculous. So we're gonna give you an update on that. Also, why there will never be Medicare for all, but there still could be coronavirus care for all, to top out today's show. So that is a good one for you here today as we get into some of the most important and really some of the biggest stories today. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We are obviously going to be your home for quarantine content now, with Newsflash being on the air every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So you're going to want to stick right by us for all the quarantine content. We got you covered. So yeah, great to add another day of the week, at least here for the duration of this quarantine. Yeah. So we start obviously at the top of Wisconsin, where they have already started going to the polls Tuesday morning, and they in the middle of a global pandemic, there are people out there saying, what, like, there are people out there saying, yelling at you for like literally going to the store when you don't have to just buy some non-essential things. Like, people are sacrificing so much for this, but still people are going to the polls to vote in a primary, one with really the Wisconsin growing death toll. We've already seen this happen during the last set of supposed primaries, which was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, where we had primaries take place in Florida, Arizona, and Illinois, and there was one in Michigan when the coronavirus crisis was just getting started. Like, there is some, like, there's just, it puts people at ridiculous health risk. It's like, what is going on here? Why is this even happening? Like, the risk to this is just, it's absolutely ridiculous and unconscionable. The fact they're putting people out here in this risk of coming down with this coronavirus, like, really quite easily and really quite disturbingly easy. But second of all, like, they're killing their own voters here. Like, this is just an absolute crime. Wisconsin's currently under a 2-week-old stay-at-home order from Governor Tony Evers, who on Monday issued a last-minute executive order seeking to postpone the vote until June, which is already suspect. Like, why is the Democratic Party, the party who's supposedly the normal party here, waiting till the very last minute to try and come in and postpone this death trap primary? That should be a major red flag. But then the state's Republican-held Supreme Court, however, was having none of it and quickly overruled the state's Democratic governor. The postponement order was ruled to be a breach of the state's constitution, which gives the state's legislature the power to change the date of election. The Republican-controlled legislature, however, refused to even consider a change in an emergency session called by the governor over the weekend. GOP lawmakers also refused to make it easier to vote by mail to avoid people showing up at the polls. So what they're really trying to do is have the lowest amount of turnout humanly possible, because I think what they're trying to do is get a certain Supreme Court justice on there. And if you look at, this is a clip here from a news reporter in Waukesha. They only have one. They have one in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I mean, why am I doing a Boston accent for Wisconsin? I do not know, but Waukesha, they have literally one polling station for a population of 72,000 people, 72,489 people, where coronavirus is already spreading. So you can imagine how ridiculously long these lines are going to be. And the crazy thing is, all the polling people, they already quit. They're like, I'm not doing this anymore. So all these people all these polling places had to shut down because there's no one to work them. And now you can imagine the lines are just going out and down the road for like up to 7 hours. Like, we already saw lines that were up to 7 hours when there was no coronavirus crisis going on. Like in, for example, Texas and all the counties, for example, that Bernie Sanders was forecast to do the best in. The lines were 7 hours long on college campuses. And other places where Bernie Sanders was forecast to do well. Just imagine how bad they're going to be here. Like, it's really ridiculous. And if you look at Milwaukee, they have a population of 595,000, and that is for literally 5 polling places. 595,000 people going to 5 polling places. Obviously, not every person in Milwaukee is registered to or even is going to vote in this. This turnout is going to be incredibly low, but it's really ridiculous. Like, you look at the line stretching ridiculously long, and people, they're definitely not 6 feet apart. You can see a lot of masks, though. Oh my gosh, it just keeps going on and on and on. Like, it's incredibly, yeah, it's incredibly crazy right now. So while the presidential primaries are being held on Tuesday, the real issue was the fate of the thousands of local races for office, ranging from county supervisors to school district board members and state judges, whose terms are set to change over this month. Evers' order would have kept the current office holders on the job until the new postponed election could be held. The underlying logic of the state's Republican Party's refusal to budge is that the lower turnout will be good for electoral chances, particularly the state Supreme Court seat that's up for grabs. So, yeah, they are having, as we'll just continue to see, massive lines. But what they're trying to do is they do have some local elections that are not primaries, but are in fact races for, like, the state Supreme Court, for example. Like, if you're going to type in, it's like some Wisconsin state Supreme Court here. That's really what they're trying to do, is get this primary going on. And they have a big, the big primary is currently what they're trying to, not the primary, it's Daniel Kelly, I think, is who they're trying to get in there. Yeah, as they try to hold this election here during the pandemic. According to Fox News, after 2 last-minute legal challenges, Wisconsin voters will head to the polls in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic for an election in which President Trump has come out with a strong endorsement, not in the Democratic presidential primary most Americans are aware of, but for incumbent Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Daniel Kelly, who they're trying to get in there, and who is being challenged by a Democrat, which they want to stop. And they figure it's going to be best for him if they get low turnout. And there's no better way to have low turnout than have an election in the middle of a pandemic where you risk dying if you go out there to vote. Yeah, so back-to-back rulings by the Wisconsin Supreme Court and U.S. Supreme Court against Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers' efforts to postpone the in-person voting day and extend absentee ballot deadline locked into the Badger State's election for Tuesday. Maybe it would have been a little bit better if he had actually issued the executive order last week, the week before that, and they actually tried to postpone these primaries when everyone else was doing it, maybe to get out in front of the legal challenges if you actually cared about keeping your people safe to Governor Tony Evers. I don't know. Yeah, so this effectively forces voters who have not yet received absentee ballots to trek to the polls in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic in order to cast their ballots. As the drama unfolded Monday, Trump re-upped his initial endorsement of Kelly, who the president called tough on crime and said is doing a terrific job protecting the Second Amendment. Kelly recused himself from the Monday decision, forcing the election to go forward. So his term's up. They're trying to continue to go on. So they already have that majority in there. So they're trying to get another... They're trying to keep him in. So the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled tomorrow's election will proceed as scheduled. Trump tweeted Monday evening, vote for Justice Daniel Kelly tomorrow and be safe. So yeah, then he tweeted in support of conservative justices he tweeted again in support of conservative justices that are on the ballot. He was first appointed to a seat by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker in 2016 and is currently facing his first re-election. He's facing a challenge from the more liberal Jill Karofsky and a nonpartisan general election. So that is the big idea there. That's who they're trying to hold off from taking over that seat is Jill Karofsky. So that's who we can clearly see. Every other state with a contest scheduled for April either postponed or shifted to a mail-in vote. Voters from the state of Wisconsin, however, now must choose between voting and their health. So that is just great. And guys, it's not just the Republicans here trying to push this election past. Every single Democrat has come out and condemned this, to give them credit, except for one. And guess who that is? Joe Biden. Joe Biden. As the fate of Wisconsin's primary, Daily Beast reporting here, volleyed between the state's Democratic governor and its Republican-led legislature and the Wisconsin Supreme Court, the man who appears to win the election scheduled to take place on Tuesday has avoided taking a hard stance on the wisdom of holding a lone contest in April not to be postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. And there's really no other way to frame this. There's no way to get around what is going on here. There's no spin on this. He is refusing to come out and condemn this. He's being silent about this election because he knows it is good for his political chances. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. Every health expert would look at you and laugh if you said, or any logical person would look at you and laugh and say, there's a safe way to hold a massive primary election and just elections in general if they are trying to, hold out an election during the middle of a pandemic. Take a look at this quote. There's a lot of things that can be done. That's for Wisconsin courts and folks to decide. Said former Vice President Joe Biden last Thursday in a virtual press briefing, which he insisted that in-person and mail-in voting could both be done safely, even though he considers the possibility of a national convention to the state to be a potential risk to public health. So we can't have the big convention where people may be a little bit angry at me. People just may be a little bit angry at me for doing this, and there may be some sort of protest from some sort of rebellious supporters of one other candidate that I may have beaten, by the way, in totally legitimate elections that were totally not held during the middle of a coronavirus pandemic. We can't have that. No way. But a primary to further anoint me, the leader of the Democratic Party, yes, that is a must. We have to do that. Literally, think about what we would do if we saw, for example, Bolivia. We just did a coup against Bolivia for what we now know to be no reason. No reason. We had no right to go in there and overthrow a socialist government that was elected by the people. We had no right to do that. But we did it because we pretty much fabricated the Organization of our Office of American States, or Organization of American States, whatever it is. They're just this margin looks a little weird. The results between the exit polls and the closing looks a little bit too weird. And it turns out to be exactly right. For example, Kevin Cashman, he was the think tank guy that I talked about. We did a whole episode on that. I don't want to rehash it, but it was literally, we found out it was for no reason we did that. Imagine if there was another country that, imagine if we saw another country doing this, we'd be starting a coup right now. We'd be starting a coup. Yes, we'd be sanctioning other countries for doing what we're holding an election in the middle of a pandemic. This is just think about it. Remove it from context, really, here, and remove it from your political beliefs is really what I'm trying to say. But think about it logically. It is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Here's Joe Biden on a convention. He says, a convention having tens of thousands of people in one arena is very different than having people walk into a polling booth with accurate spacing with 6 to 10 feet apart, one at a time going in and having the machine scrubbed down, Biden said, which, by the way, none of that is actually happening anywhere. I think you would hold the election as well as dealing with mail-in ballots and same-day registration. I think it could be done, but that's for them to decide. Biden's approach to the Wisconsin contest has put both himself and Wisconsin Democrats in a very awkward position as county leaders painted a dire picture of what voting could look like in the middle of a pandemic. The party's nominee in waiting has simultaneously floated the possibility of this summer's newly rescheduled Democratic National Convention also to be held in Wisconsin, going virtual to prevent the virus's spread, while publicly insisting that Tuesday's vote